Hare Krishna, everyone. A very warm welcome to our class on the Nectar of Devotion, which is a summary study book written by ISKCON's founder Acharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We are studying this book for last 16 classes. Today is our 17th class, and in today's session, we are going to discuss chapter number 15th of this book. The title of this chapter is Spontaneous Devotional Service. As usual, we will start with auspicious invocations. In Sanskrit, we call it as Mangalacharan. Mangala Mataji was supposed to recite Mangalacharan prayers, but somehow she mentioned she would not be able to attend the class today. So in that regard, I would request if anybody else would like to volunteer to recite Mangalacharan prayers, so like to give that opportunity to the other devotees. In case not, I can do that same. But uh,
May I pray?
okay, Rakesh Prabhu, please go ahead.
ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्ण चैतन्य देवं श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। प्रभु
Thank you, Rakesh ji, for volunteering at the last moment. Really appreciate your support, all the support that you have been giving both to the English class as well as to the Hindi class. I really appreciate. Thank you very much. Uh, Now we move to the next part, and the next part is the summary of class 16th, the previous class. And for that, let me invite Dr. Ishwar Chaudhary, who is a senior occulist. Occulist would mean eye specialist from Rohtak, Haryana. Dr. Ishwar is a very good friend of my father, Dr. Suresh Gupta. And because of my father, I could connect with Dr. Ishwarji. And Prabhuji has been a very, very enthusiastic participant in our classes right from the time he has joined us. So really eager to look forward and look forward to hear the summary of previous class from Dr. Ishwar. Prabhuji, very warm welcome. Please help us. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna, wonderful devotees. I'm happy and thankful for being considered for another opportunity. This time it is class 16 of Nectar of Devotion. The contents of this class of Nectar of Devotion relate to certain devotional qualifications and practices that are not considered limbs of bhakti, but certainly they do make a significant part of concluding discussions on Vaidhi Bhakti. These common practices include Varnashrama, Jnana, Vairagya, dependence on Dhana, Shishya, Viveka, and other material qualities like Yama Niyama, austerity, cleanliness, peacefulness, etc., etc. And what sort of relationship, if at all, these practices have with sadhana bhakti is to be understood. And that was the thing talked about last in the class 16 of Nectar of Devotion. Now we take these practices one by one, and taking up Varnashrama at number one, we find that Varnashrama is not a limb of bhakti. as has been stated in verse 246 to 47 in our scriptures, Bhakti Rasmita Sindhu. The prescribed duties of Varna and Ashrama are just ritualistic ceremonies of religion intended for economic development, that is artha, sense gratification, that is kama, or salvation, that is moksha. The example of marriage in Grihastha Asrama is the best example we can see right now. And at best, it can be considered a subsidiary or an additional item of devotional service, provided it is aimed at eventual purification and unalloyed devotion to the Lord. It is the most considered view of all the knowledgeable bhaktas, or in the ISKCON, or say according to scriptures, that the Varna Ashrama is not a part of the limbs of bhakti. And there are instances in the literature which prove this point. And the most important was told to us by a conversation between Ramanand Raya and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where the Chaitanya ji asked Ramanand Raya, what is the ultimate goal of life? When he volunteered Varnashrama as one of the answers, it was completely rejected. And finally, the answer that was proved correct was surrender in the lotus feet of the Lord as the ultimate goal of life. So, also this fact was confirmed if we go through Bhagavad Gita in chapter 18, verse 66, where the Lord says, abandon all varieties of religion and simply surrender unto me. So that is the situation we get, or that is the information, the authentic information we get from scriptures. Further reading on verse 27, we said that we must keep doing Varnashrama activities till we become detached from material sense gratification and develop a kind of faith for hearing and chanting about Lord Krishna. Now, moving on to the next practice, that is Jnana and Vairagya, which are again not limbs of bhakti, as has been told in verse number 28 to 248 to 259. They are not angas of bhakti. At best, they could be little useful in the initial stages of bhakti by helping in giving up attachment to unwanted things in life. By Gyan here we means Brahma Gyan, which has three stages: knowledge of Jiva, knowledge of Brahma, Brahman, and knowledge of their oneness. Tat, Tvam, Asi. For Bhakti, knowledge of Tvam and Tat are perfectly fine, but realization of parity and oneness with God should be discarded straightway. It cannot be. In Vairagya, we know that part which is contrary or antagonistic to bhakti should be rejected straightway. Example is that any kind of sort of aloofness shown to Krishna in the name of Vairagya is not acceptable. Also, it is a fact that Jnana and Vairagya gradually make the heart harsh, whereas bhakti alone is very tender, sweet and soft in nature. And the very cause of entering into bhakti is bhakti only. The reason being that Jnana requires deliberations on knowing the truth. And also we need defeating variety of philosophical wranglings that usually brings lot of dryness in the whole exercise. Vairagya too brings dryness and harshness because of prolonged toleration of suffering. The people who undergo Vairagya generally suffer quite a lot, And sometimes we know that even the pain becomes their medicine. दर्द भी उनको दवा लगने लगता है, ऐसे जो लोग वैराग्य की तरफ जाते हैं. The extreme tenderness in bhakti, on the other hand, is due largely to thinking of the Lord, Lord's sweet form, Lord's qualities and pastimes, and the desire to make our heart melt in relation to the Lord. Moreover, bhakti is so potent that it affords the bhakta the required goals of jnana, vairagya, and other processes in due course. A devotee cannot be in darkness because the Lord shows special favor and enlightens him from both within and outside. This is clearly written in Gita chapter 10 and verse 11. Nothing remains unobtainable for a devotee. The fruitive activities, the austerities, the knowledge, the renunciation, yoga, charity, living in heaven or in God's abode, all become possible, and all other acts of perfecting life are easily become available to him. A person with a taste for worshipping the Lord gets what is required in spiritual ascendance, be it the destruction of material attractions or prevention of hardness of heart by practice of vairagya. And finally, he becomes ready for achieving yukta vairagya. Yukta vairagya means using material objects to the extent they are useful for bhakti and in relationship with Lord Krishna, while remaining detached from the material objects. Here are the best example is preparing palatable dishes offered to the Lord and then eating it as prasad, not otherwise. The vow of rejecting anything not offered to Krishna is renunciation here. The secret of bhakti is not giving up things which can be utilized in the service of the Lord, like we use all kind of gadgets, we all books, periodicals, we like Krishna used his fighting abilities in the battlefield and told Arjuna about it wholeheartedly. Our vision at this stage should be that Krishna is everything, the cause and effect. Krishna's things must be used in the service of Krishna. Nothing is ours. We should be wary of useless renunciation, also called Falgu Vairagya, which essentially means rejecting some objects as being material, although they are related to the Lord Hari. As part of the things these can be used in the service of Hari as part of desiring liberation. The Falgu Vairagya is certainly not favorable for bhakti, and therefore it stands rejected as an anga of bhakti, just like we have rejected karm kand and impersonal gyan in the definition while considered the definition of uttama bhakti. Now moving next to dependence on wealth or dhana, which is also not considered a limb of bhakti. Bhakti dependent on wealth is not an anga of uttama bhakti, as it destroys its pure nature. The same is can be proved while reading Bhakti Rasmika Sindhu, verse 259. A wealthy person credited with large donation to a temple should not think that subsequent activities in the temple performed there are his doings only. Similarly, dependence on Shishya or having disciples is not a limb of bhakti. A guru who trains multiple disciples for worship of and bhakti cannot claim credit for his disciples' efforts in their life. It is their bhakti and not their guru's bhakti, which should be clearly understood. Now next comes the dependence on viveka or discrimination. That also is not a limb of bhakti. A devotee with viveka should take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master and practice Krishna consciousness in a devoted manner. Now coming to the next, the dependence on other materially good qualities, also not limbs of bhakti. Now, people practicing Uttama Bhakti automatically develop qualities of Devatas, good qualities of Devatas. He is naturally non-violent and vegetarian, but vice versa is not true. Similarly, basic rules of conduct like Yama Nema, that is cleanliness also, they also appear automatically as is in those devotees of Krishna who are sincere. Uh, of course, they are not in the list of angas of bhakti, but certainly they come seamlessly to such devotees who undertake to do uttama bhakti. These facts get true credence from a verse in Skanda Purana where the hunter Mrigari was totally transformed through bhakti. He became a devotee of the Lord, and thereafter he could never even think of killing an ant, what to do the violence. By this we all understand that a devotee of Lord Hari is never a cause of distress to anyone. All purity, whether internal or external, or austerity, peacefulness, and other good qualities take shelter of persons who desire to serve Sri Hari. Finally, we talk about the Ek Anga and Anek Anga Bhakti. See, bhakti when steadily performed, the important thing is doing it sincerely and steadily. When we perform bhakti steadily, be it with one anga or using many angas, the results are same. They bring about the desired results of bhava and prema, as has been confirmed in verse number 2264 of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The examples are there where Parikshit got it through Shravanam, Sukdev Goswami got it through Kirtanam, and Prahlada got it through Smarnam. Ambrish Maharaj got it through this Aneka Anga Bhakti. Now, the final word and the important word about bhakti is that Vedic bhakti is a Maryada Marg. It's a path of rules, as it is bound by strong limitation of the scriptural rules, as has been confirmed by Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, verse 269. With these words, I conclude the summary of class 16. Thank you very much again, Prabhuji, dear devotees, for giving me patient hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. That was wonderful sharing. Really appreciate every point covered with a lot of details and bringing everything for everyone's information. So that was very nice. Really appreciate. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Thanks a lot. So let us now
Thank
move
you.
to the now let us start the fresh session for today. And let me skip these first few slides. I hope the participants are already aware of these specific slides which I have mentioned mainly to revise the previous classes. But I would certainly like to stop at this slide just to tell you where we are right now. And we have just covered chapter 14th, devotional qualification, and the brief summary was recently presented by Ishwarji. Now we are moving to chapter 15, which is spontaneous devotional service. And as we discussed in the summary, we have concluded the discussion on Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti at chapter 14. So you can see this discussion started pretty early in our classes Now you can see here, right now from chapter number 2 of Nectar of Devotion, we started this discussion on Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. So you can see 2 to 10 and then all the way to 14. So almost, I would say, 13 chapters out of total 19 chapters have been dedicated to Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. So you can realize the importance and practical use of this particular topic. Moving now to spontaneous devotional service, which is in Sanskrit, would we call it as Raganug Sadhan Bhakti. And now let me take you to the slide, which I have been emphasizing to all of you to understand this slide. If you can remember the map on this slide, it will be very easy to understand Nectar of Devotion. Initially, we started the discussion with Uttama Bhakti. From Uttama Bhakti, we understood there are three types: Sadhan Bhakti, Bhav Bhakti, and Prema Bhakti. And then we entered into the details of Sadhan Bhakti. We understood that it is classified into two parts: Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti and Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti. Then we had a long discussion around Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti, and you can see these are many other topics where 64 limbs of Vaidhi Bhakti, we took a lot of classes. So after this long trip to details of Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti, now it's time to uncover the details around Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti. Rag Anuga Sadhan Bhakti. So this class we will focus mainly on Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti, and here I will say we can have this introductory slide. Sadhan Bhakti has two divisions, Vaidhi and Raganug. Chapter 2 till chapter 14 of Nectar of Devotion, we already covered Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. Chapter 15 and 16 will now cover Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti. So we are moving to the second type of Sadhan Bhakti, and the name is Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti. And in Nectar of Devotion book, there are two chapters dedicated to it. Today we will finish chapter number 15. So this discussion starts in Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu directly with the definition of Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti. And this definition is being given by Srila Rup Goswami. And the definition is like this: Virajantim abhivyaktam vrajavasi janadishu ragatmikam anusrata yasa raganugochate yasa raganugochate. Huh? So what are the translation of each of these lines? Vira jantim abhivyaktam. Vrajavasi janadishu. Vrajavasi means the residents of Vraja. Vraja means Vrindavan. Residents of Vrindavan. Vrindavan, specifically the Vrindavan in the spiritual sky. Virajantim abhivyaktam Vrajavasi janadishu. Janadishu means the residents. The bhakti that is found distinctively in residents of Vraja is called Virajantim, means which is found, it is which is manifested, Abhivyaktam Vrajavasi Janadishu. And that bhakti is called Ragatmikam, Ragatmikam, Ragatmika Bhakti. But we started with the definition of Raganuga Bhakti. Here they are talking in this definition Ragatmika Bhakti. So what is the connection with Raganuga Bhakti? So following their footsteps is called Raganuga Bhakti. So in order to describe, in order to understand Raganuga Bhakti, uh, we have to take support of, first of all, understanding Ragatmika Bhakti. So in the definition of Raganuga Bhakti, first of all, Rup Goswami is saying what is Ragatmika Bhakti, and the followers of those people who are following Ragatmika Bhakti, who are practicing Ragatmika Bhakti, they are actually called as Raganuga Bhakti. They are actually called as Raganuga Bhakti. So understanding of Raganuga Bhakti actually depends upon, first of all, understanding what is Ragatmika Bhakti. So here there are some extra notes are given. Like for example, eternal Vrajavasis do not have to learn anything about Bhakti. They are already perfect and have a spontaneous loving service attitude for Krishna. Why we are talking about Vrajvasis, eternal Vrajvasis? Because this definition of Raganuga Bhakti talks about Ragatmika Bhakti. And Ragatmika Bhakti is all about the Bhakti that is found distinctively in residents of Vraja is called Ragatmika Bhakti. So Vrajavasis, these Vrajavasis do not have to learn anything about Bhakti. They are already perfect and have a spontaneous loving service attitude for Krishna. So in the eternal abode, in the spiritual sky, in that Vrindavan, those devotees who are practicing bhakti, they are called ragatmika devotees. Actually, ragatmika bhakti is same as prema bhakti. Ragatmika bhakti is actually same as prema bhakti, and you will see as the discussion continues, Srila Rup Goswami himself will confirm this particular point. But I'm telling you in advance so that you don't get confused in the terminology here. So Raganuga Bhakti is that Bhakti where the practitioner is following those devotees who are practicing Ragatmika Bhakti. And here the example is given for Ragatmika Bhakti is Gopas playing with Krishna. So in the spiritual world, when the Gopas are playing with Krishna, they play with Krishna with spontaneous affection, spontaneous love, with that kind of attitude, they play with Krishna. They don't think Krishna as God. They think Krishna as their very, very dear friend. Uh, So that is the kind of bhakti these eternal residents of Vrindavan in the spiritual sky they are following. So that is called Ragatmika Bhakti. And who are following those devotees who are following Ragatmika Bhakti are called as Raga Anuga Bhaktas. Now let us uh, go deeper into this discussion. So from the previous slide, we understood that to define Raganuga Bhakti, first Ragatmika Bhakti is discussed. So our objective is mainly to understand what is Raganuga Bhakti. But in the definition of Raganuga Bhakti, we stumbled upon one word which is called Ragatmika Bhakti. So before we understand Raganuga Bhakti properly, we are supposed to understand Ragatmika Bhakti in much more detail. And this chapter number 15 actually is mainly about Ragatmika Bhakti. And after understanding sufficiently well this Ragatmika Bhakti, then we move on to the chapter number 16 where Raganuga Bhakti is mainly elaborated and discussed. So essentially, in this particular session, although we are talking about Raganuga Bhakti in our title, but in chapter number 15, primarily the discussion has been mainly on Ragatmika Bhakti. Yeah. So that is why Srila Rupa Goswami immediately jumps to the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti in this particular chapter. So what is the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti? Ishte swarasiki ragah, Ishte swarasiki ragah, Paramavishtata bhavet, Paramavishtata bhavet, Tanmaya bhavet bhaktihi, Tanmaya bhavet bhaktihi, Sa atra ragatmidot, Sa atra ragatmikodita, Sa atra ragatmikodita. What is this? Ishte. Ishta means the object of our love, the object of our devotion. That is the Ishta. Like we say in Hindi, Ishtadev. So that is the object. Swarasiki. Swarasiki means spontaneous, automatic. It is very naturally coming out from someone's from inside. Ragaha. Ragaha means attraction or thirst. Param avishtata. Param avishtata means param means very intense. Avishtata means again attraction. Param avishtata. Param avishtata means very intense. Bhavet. So what does this whole Sanskrit means? Rag is defined as natural, intense, and spontaneous attraction or thirst for the object of love. So there is an object of love, and if a person is feeling very spontaneous, intense, and natural attraction for that object, that is defined as rag. Rag, attachment, attraction, or thirst. Then tanmayi ya bhavet bhakti, Sa atra ragatmikodita. Sa atra ragatmikodita. So that is called as ragatmika bhakti. But what is called as ragatmika bhakti? Tanmayi ya bhaved bhakti. Tanmayi. Tanmayi means actually means becoming one. Tanmayi means becoming one with the tan. So whatever feeling is there, that is actually the whole consciousness of that particular individual. So bhakti exclusively impelled by such a thirst is called ragatmika bhakti. So that bhakti which is exclusively only this kind of thirst is there, that is known as ragatmika bhakti. Now here let us see uh, some other details about ragatmika bhakti here in the bullet points. That deep thirst causes absorption. So here we are using two words to define ragatmika bhakti: attraction or thirst. Now what happens with that attraction or thirst? That attraction or thirst leads to absorption. Absorption means the person or the individual who has that kind of thirst for that object of love become absorbed. Absorbed means that becomes the very nature of that particular person. Uh, so that is the deep thirst causes absorption. Here then what means the cause, which is the thirst, and the and is considered non-different from the effect, the absorption. So the cause is the thirst, and the effect, what happens because of this thirst, there is absorption. So this second line says the cause is considered non-different from the effect. So a person has a thirst for an object of love, and because of their thirst, that person becomes absorbed in that object of love. So here this particular line is saying that the thirst and the absorption are non-different. Like for example, if I say uh, ghee is life. Ghee is life. Now in the modern context, the word ghee to some of the individuals might appear very non-healthy. But from the perspective of Ayurveda, ghee actually is very, very healthy from the Ayurvedic perspective. Now it is considered so healthy that in Ayurveda, it is mentioned that ghee is life. Ghee is life means if a person is healthy, if a person is living long, so the credit goes to because he has been eating sufficient quantity of ghee in his daily meals. So ultimately, it is so important that the person is saying ghee is life, means ghee and life are non-different. So similarly, here the thirst is so important for that absorption that it is mentioned here that the thirst is no different from the absorption that the person gets because of that thirst. So that is actually called ragatmika bhakti, and it is no different from prema bhakti. Prema bhakti also, the practitioner or or the individual actually is so absorbed, so deeply, intensely absorbed in the object of love that the very consciousness, the very uh, individuality of that person is actually becoming one with the object of love. One with the object of love, not in the physical sense, but in the spirit of that love. It has become one with that object of love. So the second bullet here says that love filled thirst or actions inspired by it. For example, stringing garlands for Krishna, which generates complete absorption in the object of love, is called ragatmika bhakti. That is called ragatmika bhakti. Now, as we have been doing throughout this sessions on Bhaktir Samrat Sindhu, when we have to understand the definition, Srila Rupa Goswami has given definitions in such a nice way that simply by learning the name of that particular definition, like for example, if we want to understand Ragatmika, so simply if we understand the meaning of word Ragatmika, the definition actually becomes very clear. The definition in itself becomes very clear. Like we have been discussing about Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. So Sadhan Bhakti means employing our senses, employing our mind. So Sadhan means engaging something. And here in Sadhan means engaging our mind, engaging our senses. Vaidhi means following some rules. So following rules of scriptures, that is Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. Similarly, Ragatmika The word Ragatmika, if we understand the meaning of word Ragatmika, the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti will become very, very clear. So Ragatmika literally means one whose essence means Atma, is intense attachment. Attachment means Raga for Krishna. One who is very existence, one who is very essence, one who is very nature actually means intense attachment for Krishna. So that is called Rag Atmika Bhakti. Uh, so there is no difference between the individual and the consciousness that he is holding. So that is the literal meaning of Ragatmika Bhakti. Here we can understand Ragatmika by another way. Rag also means color. Wearing red colored glasses causes one to see red everywhere. Similarly, when one has extremely intense attachment, we see the object of our obsession everywhere all the time. So for example, if a young boy has fallen in love with a girl, now that young boy, when the girl is not around, that young boy sees that girl in the tree also. That young boy sees that girl on the road also, in his house also, everywhere. That young boy, because the consciousness of young boy is so absorbed in the thoughts of that girl, or vice versa. I mean, the girl can also feel the similar emotion towards that boy, towards a boy. Huh? But the point is, here the meaning of word rag has been defined a little differently. Like, it also means color. So if you wear red colored glasses, you see red everywhere. So the person who is absorbed, deeply, intensely absorbed in the thought of the beloved, sees the beloved everywhere. So that is the meaning of word rag. So rag means intense, natural, spontaneous, deep attachment, attraction, thirst for the object of love. That is called ragatmika bhakti. And somebody who is following such an individual, who is not at the platform of that kind of a deep, intense attachment, that person may not be at that level, but attracted by the attachment of that person for Krishna. If somebody starts following that person out of greed, out of uh, uh, out of attraction towards that person, that actually is known as rag anuga bhakti. So here we are concluding the understanding of the two words ragatmika and raganuga. Here ragatmika bhakti means perfect devotional attachment found in the residents of Vrindavan, and raganuga sadhan bhakti. So you can see here the word sadhan has not been used when defining ragatmika bhakti, but the word sadhan has been used while defining raganuga, because in raganuga the sadhan is mainly to follow into the footsteps of that person who has ragatmika bhakti. So that is the sadhan. So raganuga sadhan bhakti means practice of a devotee who aspires to develop their devotional mood. There means those devotees who have ragatmika bhakti. So rag anuga, again we can understand the meaning of the definition of a particular word by understanding the meaning of that word. Rag anuga, as I mentioned, attachment, and anuga means follower. Hmm. So follower of ragatmika devotee, follower of that devotee who has ragatmika devotion towards Lord Krishna. So that is rag anuga. A similar word that we often use in ISKCON is rupanuga. Rupanuga actually means follower of Rup Goswami. And sometimes we also use the word Prabhupada Anuga. Prabhupada Anuga means follower of Srila Prabhupada. So similarly, Rag Anuga means those people who are following Ragatmika devotee. I hope the definition of Ragatmika and Raganuga is now very clear to the devotees here. Now we take the discussion to the next level, where we are going to discuss about various types of Ragatmika Bhakti. As I mentioned, in this chapter, we will focus mainly on Ragatmika Bhakti. Raganuga will start in the next chapter, in the next class. So before we understand Raganuga, we have a very clear understanding. We should have a clear understanding of Ragatmika Bhakti. Two types of Ragatmika Bhakti. One is Kam Rupa, another one is Sambandha Rupa. Now, Kam Rupa means what? Impelled by conjugal feelings. impelled by conjugal feelings. Conjugal means what? Pertaining to marriage, pertaining to vivaha. Like when you married someone, then the relationship has a particular taste. The relationship between the boy and the girl after their marriage has a particular taste. Uh, like a relationship between a son and a father has a particular taste. A relationship between a friend and a friend has a particular taste. So each relationship has a particular flavor to it. So uh, Ragatmika Bhakti also has two primary flavors or two primary types. One is Kama Rupa, impelled by conjugal feelings. Conjugal feelings, the feelings that we have in the relationship of marriage. Sambandha Rupa, impelled by other relationships. So marriage has been kept separately, and other relationships could be friend, a servant, a parent, like that. Sambandha Rupa. Now somebody might ask, uh, okay, so I have defined here, devotees experience Kama Rupa, feel intense desire to satisfy the Lord in conjugal love. Sambandha Rupa includes devotee who experience an intense desire to satisfy the Lord as his parent, friend, or intimate servant. So this is a little more, elaboration or Kama Rupa and Sambandha Rupa. Now, the clarification given in the third bullet is, somebody might question that marriage relationship in a marriage is also a relationship, and relationship with parents, relationship with friends, relationship with a servant, that is also a relationship. So both are relationship. Marriage relationship is also a relationship. Friend, parenthood, and servanthood is also a relationship. But then why are we classifying Kama Rupa as separate and Sambandha Rupa as separate? So one relationship we are identifying separately, but all other relationship we are clubbing into only one category called Sambandha Rupa. Marriage related relationship we are uh, classifying only as Kama Rupa. Why it is so? If both are relationship, why are we making a separate classification? So the answer is given here. Now, if you the answer to this question is that conjugal relationship is called as a chief relationship. It's a primary relationship. That is why it has been identified as separately. In order to explain this point, in order to understand this point, let us focus on this statement. If we say everybody is coming, king is also coming. What does it mean? When we say everybody is coming, it automatically includes king. But a special mention of king is mentioned because a king is a important person. A king has a certain very importance associated with it, associated with the post. So when we say everybody is coming, king is also coming, we are trying to give an emphasis on that person, on the post that actually is very important. So that is why when we say conjugal relationship, it's a chief relationship, and that is why we are classifying it as separately. And sambandha rupa, or sambandha rupa relationship that we are uh, here mentioning, we are classifying it as separately, because as all other relationships. Okay, so this is a understanding of types of ragatmika bhakti. Now Srila Rupa Goswami further starts to develop this discussion on what is ragatmika bhakti, and he takes help of Srimad Bhagavatam, where uh, ragatmika bhakti has been defined in Srimad Bhagavatam, and he picks up a verse from Canto 7th, uh, and this verse from Canto 7th from Srimad Bhagavatam has been mentioned in verse number 274 in Bhakti Samrat Sindhu. This verse talks about liberation by thinking of Krishna in many ways. How devotees in the past have attained liberation by thinking of Krishna. So from there, Rup Goswami further develops the discussion around the two proper types of Ragatmika Bhakti. So let us see how he develops this discussion. It says, Kamadveshat bhayat snehat yatha bhakteshware manah आवेश्य तद अघम हित्वा Bahavastadgatim gataha. Bahavastadgatim gataha. What is Rupa Goswami is trying to say? Kamat. Kamat means by lust. Dveshat. Dveshat means hatred. Bhayat. Bhayat means fear. And snehad. Snehad means affection. Yatha bhakteshware manaha, or devotion. Snehad and then bhakteshware manaha. Bhakteshware means devotion. Thinking of Krishna in the mind. Aveshya tad agham hitva, with absorption, thus giving up their sin. So how to think Krishna in the mind? Aveshya. Aveshya means with absorption. So we already understood this word absorption in the definition of Ragatmika Bhakti in just few slides before. Bahavas tad gatim gataha. Bahavas means many. Like we say bahuvachan. Bahuvachan in Hindi means plural. Bahavas. Bahavas means many. Tad gatim gataha. Tad gatim gata means attained the same end. Attained the same end. Now let us look in a more comprehensive manner. By lust, hatred, fear, affection, or devotion. Thinking of Krishna in the mind with absorption and thus giving up their sin, many have attained the same end. So, how many have attained the same end? There are 5 ways discussed here: lust, hatred, fear, affection, or devotion. Now, here uh, somebody might challenge why hatred, why fear has been mentioned here. So if we are hating Krishna and out of our hatred we are absorbed in Krishna, or out of fear we are absorbed in Krishna, are these really are is Rup Goswami really recommending here that we uh, remember Krishna out of hate, or we remember Krishna out of fear? Is Rup Goswami trying to hint that? No, that is not the main point of this verse. So what is the main point of this verse? The main point of the verse is somehow or other absorb the mind in Krishna. So here the stress is mainly on absorption, aveshya, aveshya. Here Rup Goswami is not recommending development of inimical emotions for Krishna. That is not what the focus or thrust of the recommendation. The thrust of the recommendation is absorption. And why absorption? Because we are trying to understand Ragatmika Bhakti as discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, we find a verse where it is mentioned that when uh, some people, some devotees actually absorbed their mind in Krishna out of lust, hatred, fear, affection, or devotion, they could attain the same end. They attained the same end. Same end means they got the same destination. That's what they are saying. Now, here again, somebody might challenge when we say attain the same end. Somebody might challenge, say, if we remember Krishna out of hatred, or if we remember Krishna out of fear, huh? What if somebody is remembering Krishna out of genuine love? So how can you say that both these class of devotees have attained the same end? So that is why there is a little footnote given here. Everyone will not attain the same end, and more clarification is coming in the verse number 278. So after a couple of slides later, I will try to explain you what exactly does it mean. So it is certainly not the case that people who have hated Krishna, who have feared Krishna, and out of these emotions they were absorbed in the thoughts of Krishna, they attained the same end as those people who were uh, loving Krishna, who were remembering Krishna, who were absorbed in Krishna out of affection or devotion. So they too attained different destinations. But here we will understand that particular part in the coming slides. So let us hold on for that for a moment. Further, the previous verse was verse number 30 from Bhagavatam. Now the very next verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. So previous verse was 7:130 in Srimad Bhagavatam. Now the next verse is 7:131. Here example is given of those people who attained Krishna in various ways. So in the previous slide, there were ways given. Now here in 275, the very next verse, examples of those people who attained Krishna in various ways, that is given. So here, Gopaya kamat bhayat kamso dveshat chedyadayo narpaha Sambandhat Vrishnaya Snehat Yuyam Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. Yuyam Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. So here you will see 6 examples are mainly given. What are those 6 examples? 6 examples are Gopayah Kamad. So we discussed in the previous slide lust. So here that lust is mentioned as Kamad. Kamad means conjugal desires. Conjugal desires means desires that are there in the relationship of marriage. Gopis by conjugal desires, and Bhayat Kamso. Kamso means comes. The maternal uncle of Lord Krishna. Kamsa by fear of death. Bhaya. Dveshad Chedyadayo Nripaha. Chedya. Chedya means Chedi. It comes from the word Chedi. Chedi was the name of the place whose king was this person called Shishupal. So here Shishupal is being mentioned here as Chedyadayo Nripaha. So the king of Chedi Desh. So Shishupal and other kings had Dvesh. Dvesh means hatred, enviousness. So that was Shishupal way of attaining Krishna, out of hatred or dvesh, out of envy. Sambandhad Vrishnaya. Sambandhad Vrishnaya Snehad. Sambandhad Vrishnaya means Vrishnis by relationship. Relationship actually means affectionate relationship here. And Snehad Yuyam. Now this verse has been spoken by Narad Muni to Yudhishthir Maharaj. So here the word Yuyam is a Sanskrit word which means you. Snehad Yuyam. So here you Pandavas by Sneha. Sneha means affection. And Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. Bhaktya Vayam. Vayam means we. Narad Muni is now addressing everybody else as we. Bhaktya Vayam Vibho. Here we like general devotees like Narad by Vaidhi Bhakti. So here you can see gopis attained Krishna how? By Kam. Kam means conjugal desires. Kamsa attained Krishna by absorption in fear of death, Bhaya. Shishupal attained Krishna by Dvesh. Vrishnis are Yadavas, the Yadus in the family of Lord Krishna. Vrishni by relationship, that means Sambandha. And Pandavas by affection, that is Sneha. And we Narad Muni is saying, we like general devotees, we attained Krishna by Bhaktya means Vaidhi Bhakti. Now, after giving these two references from Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Rupa Goswami analyzes these two verses and tries to see which verses or which type, which category actually really falls in the category of Ragatmika Bhakti. Which falls into the category of Ragatmika Bhakti. So in the previous verse, we discussed 6 types: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Kam, Bhaya, Dvesha, Sambandha, Sneha, and general devotees like Vedi Bhakti. So which of these 6 categories actually fall into the category of Ragatmika Bhakti? That Srila Rupa Goswami now analyzes in the subsequent 2 verses in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 276 and 277. He says, fear and envy clearly are not genuine forms of spontaneous devotion because of unfavorable attitudes. So here he is ruling out that fear and envy, I would not like to classify them as Ragatmika. Why? Because the attitude of the practitioner was unfavorable to Krishna. So this has been rejected. Fear and envy, Bhaya and Dvesha. So 2 categories out. Then he comes to affection for Krishna, Sneha. And that was seen in Pandavas. In the previous slide, you see here, you Pandavas by affection, Snehad Yuyam. So affection for Krishna may or may not be Ragatmika, depending on whether it is mixed with awe and reverence. Generally, it is mixed with awe and reverence, which forces Pandavas to be restrained by formality and etiquette. So here Rupa Goswami is analyzing that relationship of Pandavas and Krishna was sneha, affection. Now, can we classify this relationship of affection as Ragatmika? Rupa Goswami is saying maybe and may not be. And why maybe and may not be? So he's thinking, Rupa Goswami is thinking, If the affection is at the level of friendliness, then maybe we can classify this sneha as ragatmika. But in general, Pandavas had a lot of awe and reverence, respect, that he is the Supreme Lord. If you remember in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna offers prayers to Lord Krishna when he sees his universal form. And when he offers those prayers to Krishna after seeing that universal form, Arjuna was in lot of awe and reverence. There was no informal relationship like friendliness. That relationship of friendliness was sidelined at that very moment. That is what Shri Goswami is trying to hint here, that generally Pandavas had this relationship of awe and reverence, uh, which force Pandavas to act with lot of formality and etiquette when they approach Krishna. And when you are approaching somebody with formality, with etiquette, then spontaneous love doesn't come. Uh, That spontaneous, natural love for someone doesn't come. Like, for example, if Narendra Modi comes to our house, how we will treat Narendra Modi? We will not treat Narendra Modi, "Hi Narendra, how are you? What are you doing? Are you going to Malaysia next week? Are you going to Cambodia next week? What are you doing?" We don't treat Narendra Modi like that. We treat Narendra Modi like a very with awe and reverence. Now the Prime Minister has come to our house. Let us offer the best possible respect, the best possible seat, the best possible food we can offer to this gentleman. So when there is a formality, when there is a awe and reverence in the relationship, spontaneous love doesn't come into picture. Yeah. So that is why the relationship of Pandavas have been rejected by Srila Rup Goswami as one of the forms of Ragatmika. So we have rejected Bhaya, we have rejected Dvesha, and we have rejected Sneha. Now let us look more categories. Now the fourth category being analyzed here is Bhaktya of Narad, Bhakti of Narad. Bhakti of Narad arises from a sense of duty. It is characterized by reverential worship of the Lord in his previous life. Thus, it is understood to be Vaidhi Bhakti. So, it is not Raganuga Sadhan Bhakti, it is actually Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. Now, in the previous classes, we have briefly discussed about how Narad became a Bhakta. Narad was a son of a maid servant, very, very poor. And one fine day, he came in contact with the Bhaktivedanta devotees who were traveling. And in that travel, these devotees stayed in the month of Chaturmas. These devotees stayed at the house of Narad. And his mother, Narad himself, offered a lot of service to these devotees. And not only served these devotees, but also took the prasad from these devotees. So you can see how Narad came in contact with these devotees, and he did some service for these devotees and associated with these devotees. And that's how this devotional mood, this devotional uh, emotion actually developed within Narad. And he became very restless. His mother passed away because of the snake bite, and rather Narad became very restless to find the Lord. And in the next life, subsequent lives, then he achieved this body of Narad Muni. So the point is, the Narad Muni did not had a spontaneous natural attraction when he came in the contact of devotees. He became bhakta because of association, because the prasad that was offered by these devotees to Narad. So that is how he came in, became a devotee. That is the reason why it is mentioned here that bhakti in Narad actually arises from a sense of duty. So Narad, out of sense of duty, actually served those Bhakti Vedantis who happened to come to his mother's house. And the relationship is again a relationship of reverential worship, in awe and reverence, out of respect. So that is why this bhakti by Narad Muni is not classified as Ragatmika, it is actually understood as Vaidhi Bhakti. It is based on following of rules and regulations of the scripture. So again, this fourth category of bhakti by Narad is also ruled out. Now, what are those other two remaining? Other two remaining are conjugal desires, which is calm, and familial relationship, which is sambandha, are genuine types of ragatmika bhakti. So Rup Goswami zeroes down or shortlist the list of six types of six ways of becoming absorbed in Krishna to only two types as proper, authentic ways of ragatmika bhakti. What is those? That is Kam Roop and then the Sambandha Roop, conjugal desire. So that is how we discussed few slides earlier. What did we discuss few slides earlier? Ragatmika Bhakti are of two types, Kama Roop and Sambandha Roop. Then in the subsequent verses, in the subsequent slides, what we have done, we have taken two verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. Actually, Rup Goswami has taken two verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, identified in what possible ways devotees in the past or people in the past have absorbed themselves in Krishna. Then he analyzed those six types, and out of those six types, he shortlisted only two, which is Kamarupa and Ragatmika. Sorry, Kamarupa and Sambandharupa. And those were the two types we just mentioned to you, that Ragatmika Bhakti is of two types. So Srila Rupa Goswami actually is proving to us that there are only two type of Ragatmika Bhakti. One is Kamarupa Bhakti and Sambandharupa Bhakti, and that he kind of supported by giving examples from Srimad Bhagavatam. And after giving those examples, he analyzed each of those and only shortlisted two of those. So that is how we are approaching to this subject matter. So move to move further on our discussion today. Now, okay, I mentioned to you in one of those slides which was on 274, this slide. They many have attained the same end. Bahavas tad gatim gataha. Many have attained the same end. Now, in the footnote, I mentioned everyone will not attain the same end. More clarification in the verse number 278. Now, here the verse number 278 has come. So, they achieved the same goal. And I have made this in inverted commas. So, what is the hidden meaning? Read between the lines. What is the hidden meaning about this phrase? Do favorable and unfavorable emotions have the same end? That is the question we asked. One is having a favorable emotion, another one is having emotions of hatred, emotion of fear. Uh, are these going to get the same end? Srila Rup Goswami answers this in two verses, 278 and 279 of chapter 2. He's saying, when it is said in verse number 274 that the enemies and friends of Krishna attained the same end, it is in the sense that impersonal Brahman and personal form of Krishna are one entity, like the sun and sun rays are one. Like the sun and the sun rays are one. So, in order to make this discussion a little easier, what actually Rup Goswami is saying is that those people who had this emotion of enmity for Krishna, actually they attained impersonal Brahman. They did not attain the lotus feet of Krishna. They could not enter into the uh, kingdom of the Lord, or sorry, into the personal abode of the Lord, where the Lord can be associated with in a more personal way. Like when two people meet, they can associate with each other in a personal way. So the enemies of Lord Krishna only attained impersonal Brahman. And what is impersonal Brahman? Impersonal Brahman is the bright effulgence that is coming out from the body of the Lord, Brahma Jyoti. So here, when we say that they attained the same goal, it is said in the spirit that the body of the Lord and the Brahma Jyoti of the Lord actually are considered only one. They are not considered separate. So Brahma Jyoti and the Supreme Lord is considered one. So here it is said, it is in the sense that impersonal Brahman and personal form of Krishna are one entity. So when we say that the enemies of the Lord attained impersonal Brahman and the devotees of the Lord actually attained the lotus feet of the Lord, actually we are saying that they attained the same goal, because we are considering, we are assuming, we are understanding that the personal form of the Lord and the impersonal aspect of the Lord are actually one entity. And here Rup Goswami gives an analogy. For example, the sun and the sun rays are one. Sun and sun rays are one. How do you understand this? Like in the morning when we are sleeping, and uh, our mother comes to our room and just removes the curtain from the window. So she says, get up from your bed because sun has already come. Now she may not have seen the sun directly from the window. The sun may be somewhere else in the horizon. But just because there was sunlight available in the outside, the mother said that yes, the sun has come. So she is identifying sun same as with sun rays. So similarly, the impersonal effulgence of the Lord and the body of the Lord are considered to be the same. Now here another analogy is given. To enter the kingdom and to enter the king's palace are not the same thing. So actually these impersonal Brahman, merging into the impersonal Brahman or entering into the impersonal Brahman is something like entering the kingdom. But entering the kingdom does not mean that you have actually gone to the palace of the king. Palace of the king is a more confidential part of the kingdom. Not everyone can go there. So the enemies of the Lord actually get liberation, but they are only restricted to the impersonal Brahman effulgence of the Lord. But those who are devotees, they actually get to enter into the palace of the Lord. That means the personal abode of the Lord. So here again in 279, verse number 279, the enemies of the Lord generally merge into the impersonal Brahman. So this is a statement that is mentioned in Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, verse 279. Now next in verse number 280, Srila Rupa Goswami quotes from Brahmanda Purana. So the previous the previous statement in 279 was statement by Srila Rupa Goswami. That is his own personal statement, but he supports his own statement from where? From the scriptures. He immediately quotes Brahmanda Puran. He says in Brahmanda Puran, actually it is mentioned what is the destination of those who are enemies of the Lord. So what does Brahmanda Puran says? The spiritual sky, Siddhalok, is far beyond the material sky, which is Prakriti. There demons killed by the Lord and some sages dwell in Brahma Jyoti. There demons killed by the Lord and some sages dwell in Brahma Jyoti. So that is Brahmanda Purana. Now you have been studying some of these Puranas, some of these stories from these Puranas, and every time you see that when a demon is killed by the Lord, like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksh, Ravan, Shishupal, and then many other such demons, whenever they have been killed, they actually attain liberation. They attain liberation that is only restricted to the impersonal Brahma Jyoti of the Lord. They don't get to enter into uh, the personal abode of the Lord. And that reference actually is there in Brahmanda Purana. Again, the same subject. Now here Srila Rupa Goswami mentions the destination of devotees. Here he says, those who developed spontaneous love for Krishna and worship him with intense absorption enter the spiritual planets and attain the nectar of his lotus feet. So in verse number 281 of Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami clarifies what is the destination of those who do spontaneous love for Krishna, who have developed spontaneous love for Krishna and worship him with intense absorption. What is their destination? Their destination is the lotus feet of the Lord. So there is a clear distinction between the enemies of the Lord and the real proper devotees of the Lord. Okay. Now, in this next verse 282, Srila Rupa Goswami summarizes the discussion by quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam. Here, this is the statement by Rupa Goswami. So, Rupa Goswami, every time he makes a statement, he gives a proper justification by quoting from the scriptures. And we have discussed this point in earlier in our classes when he started discussing about 64 limbs of sadhan bhakti, that Rupa Goswami is not saying that because my guru mentioned it, you should follow it. Rup Goswami is giving a proper reference from the scripture where he's saying what he's saying. So again, Rup Goswami immediately mentions Bhagavatam and summarizes the whole discussion that he has just now developed on do favorable and unfavorable emotions have the same end. What does Rup Goswami writes from Srimad Bhagavatam? He says, simply by constantly thinking of him, the enemies of the Lord attained the same Brahman that sages fixed in yoga worship by controlling their breath, mind, and senses. Similarly, we Shrutis, adopting a mood similar to gopis and finally attaining similar bodies, will achieve the same nectar from your lotus feet that your consorts are able to relish because of their loving attraction to your mighty serpentine arms. Now, this is a little long text, so you may not have been able to comprehend it immediately. But what I'm trying to say here is, what Srimad Bhagavatam is trying to say here is, again, the 2 points that were mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami are clarified here. One thing is that the enemies only attain the Brahman stage, they don't attain the personal abode of the Lord. But again, an example is given of the Shrutis. Now, who are these Shrutis? These Shrutis are Vedas personified, the Vedic books as persons. These are called Shrutis. Uh, So, Shrutis are reciting this prayer. Shrutis are making this statement in Bhagavatam. What they are saying, we Shrutis adopting a mood similar to gopis. So, the gopis have some mood. Gopis' mood is Ragatmika. And Shrutis are saying that we are following the same mood of the gopis and finally attain similar bodies. Similar bodies means the same bodies as gopis. Will achieve the same nectar from your lotus feet that your consorts have able to relish because of their loving attraction to your mighty serpentine arms. So attraction to mighty serpentine arms, this is indicative of conjugal relationship, a relationship like in we have in marriage. So Shrutis are saying that we were able to attain your lotus feet because we attained the same mood of the gopis, and the mood of the gopis is the conjugal relationship, and thus how we attained your lotus feet also. So here gopis are actually ragatmika devotees. Gopis are the ragatmika devotees because gopis have spontaneous, natural, intense attraction or thirst for their object of love, that is Krishna. So they are gopis are ragatmika devotees, but here Shrutis are actually following the gopis, following the mood of the gopis. So Shrutis are actually Raganuga devotees. Shrutis are here Raganuga devotees. But the point here, dear devotees, is that Rup Goswami is summarizing the theme around this question: do favorable and unfavorable emotions have the same end? So the answer is no, they don't have the same end. Those who are unfavorable but still in absorption of Krishna, they attain only impersonal Brahmajyoti. But those who have favorable emotions, favorable absorbed emotions for Krishna, they attain Lord's lotus feet. And Rup Goswami has quoted a proper reference from Srimad Bhagavatam to prove this point. Moving ahead, now you might be wondering that Prabhuji, right from the beginning of the class, has been mentioning about several ways to attain Krishna. And one of the ways he mentioned about lust. Then he mentioned about fear. Then he also mentioned about hatred. So he identified fear and hatred as negative emotions. But what about lust? Lust is also a negative emotion. And why Prabhuji is not mentioning about lust as a negative emotion? So now here, dear devotees, we need to understand the difference between mundane lust and transcendental lust. Mundane calm versus transcendental calm. So in the material world, when we are in the conjugal relationship with our spouse, the emotion that we feel towards our spouse is of mundane lust, is of material lust. But in the spiritual world, there is nothing called mundane, there is nothing called material. Everything is spiritual, everything is selfless. That is why it is known as transcendental calm, transcendental lust. Now let us try to understand the meaning of word lust in the proper sense that has been used by Srila Rupa Goswami by using the word kam, because he's saying ragatmika bhakti is kama rupa bhakti and sambandha rupa bhakti. So kama rupa bhakti, actually we get this notation, or this we get this feeling that kam actually means lust. But here there's a difference between mundane lust and transcendental lust. Let us see how. The exchange of love between Krishna and the gopis resembles embracing, dancing, and so forth. This causes some difficulty in the minds of conditioned souls. So, when we talk about the Leelas of Lord Krishna together with gopis, in the description we read that Lord Krishna embraced the gopis, or gopis embraced Krishna, or they were dancing together, and this causes some difficulty in the mind of people who are in this material world, in the minds of conditioned souls like us. Now, here, Srila Rupa Goswami in the next few verses clarifies the meaning of Kam Roop Ragatmika Bhakti by providing its definition in verse number 283. And what that definition is: that type of bhakti with full absorption in the beloved is called Kam Rupa Bhakti, which produces an intrinsic thirst for a conjugal relationship with the Lord. It is called bhakti because in that condition there is only eagerness for giving pleasure to Krishna and not for personal enjoyment. So this is the main point here we need to understand, dear devotees. In mundane lust, the the driving force for mundane lust is our own enjoyment, our own selfish enjoyment. But in the transcendental lust, the driving force is to give pleasure to Krishna, to give the pleasure to the Lord. So that is the difference between mundane calm and transcendental calm. So that is the definition of Kama Rupa Ragatmika Bhakti. Here the devotee feels intense love, intense thirst in a conjugal relationship with the Lord. And in that relationship, the devotee wants to give so much to the beloved, not for his own personal gratification, but for the personal enjoyment of the beloved. That is the main difference between transcendental calm and mundane calm. More on that topic. Now, Srila Rupa Goswami mentions Vraj Gopis as the example of Kam Rup Bhakti. So, before in the previous slide, he in this previous verse 283, Rup Goswami has given the definition of Kam Rup uh, Ragatmika Bhakti. Now, in this next two verses, 284 and 285, he quotes that Vraj Gopis are the example of Kam Rup Bhakti. He says, the very famous Kam Rup Bhakti appears with brilliance in the women of Vraja. They have a particular type of prem which has a special sweetness. It is called calm by the wise because it is the cause of various amorous activities. It is the cause of amorous activities. So simply because the gopis have a very special sweetness, very special sweet love for the Lord, and that resembles the love in the conjugal relationship. Huh? And the wise have called that calm. The wise or the learned people are classifying that particular relationship as calm or lust because it leads to various amorous activities. Amorous activities means like embracing or maybe dancing together. So that is why it may appear as calm, but actually it is not calm. Externally, it may appear as calm, but internally it is very pure. It is actually the pinnacle of prem. It is actually pinnacle of love. That is the understanding we need to have. So Srila Rupa Goswami gives reference from Tantra that this Kam Rupa Bhakti of gopis is actually prem. Now, what is the reference from Tantra? The Kam Rupa Bhakti of the gopis has become famous simply as prem. This is the reference from Tantra mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, verse number 285. So again, Rupa Goswami, when he's making a point, he's giving a reference from the scripture. So don't think when we are classifying Vraj Gopis as Kam Roop Ragatmika Bhakti, it has anything to do with mundane lust. It is actually only transcendental calm, which is in which there is an intense desire to give satisfaction to the beloved. So these are the pictures of gopis together with Lord Krishna. Very beautiful picture. Now, mundane calm versus transcendental calm. Here a little explanation to it. So these words are coming from Srila Prabhupada. It is saying, spiritual relationships are never lusty or selfish. When Srila Rupa Goswami says that Krishna's relationship with the gopis is lusty or kamrup, he uses the word only figuratively. He uses the word figuratively. What is the opposite of figuratively? Literally. Literally means, say, what is the actual dictionary meaning of the word? That is the way, that is the sense it is being applied here. But figuratively means it is indicative. It is not actually calm, but is indicative of calm. It actually like calm, to aid our basic understanding. To aid our basic understanding. Now, further, Srila Prabhupada explains, the gopis' ecstatic love for Krishna is sometimes described by scholar as being like a lusty desire of the material world, but this should not be taken as a literal fact, like figuratively literal fact. It is simply a way of trying to understand the transcendental situation. It is only to help us understand the nature of relationship, the intensity of relationship, the depth of relationship. Only to make that point understand, this word calm has been used, lusty has been used, but actually it is not lusty. More to it, the gopis are consumed and obsessed by a passion to satisfy Krishna, the force of which is beyond our ability to comprehend. This is the very good bullet to understand. The intensity of love of gopis for Krishna is so deep, is so strong, that for us conditioned souls, it is even impossible to understand that intensity. It is very difficult for conditioned souls like us to understand that intensity. And the closest we can understand in our experience that intensity is the lusty relationship which we enjoy or which we hold when we are in a conjugal relationship. So here, by comparing it to mundane lust, the single most consuming and overwhelming urge in our experience, we may catch the slightest hint of the intensity of the gopis' desire to serve Krishna. So for conditioned souls like us, the the most consuming and overwhelming urge in our experience is lust. In the conjugal relationship, uh, the kind of overwhelming and consuming emotion of lust that we experience, that is the most that is the closest we can understand. When we are told that this particular emotion is very very consuming, very very overwhelming, very very overwhelming means we just can't hold on to ourselves. The overwhelming urge in our experience. So that is the reason this example of, or this particular word, or this particular uh, uh, phrase of kama rupa has been used. Because if we explain the conditioned soul may possibly try to understand the intensity of love of gopis for Krishna, but we must understand very carefully that Krishna's conjugal love affairs are impeccably transcendental. Eternally, they may resemble mundane lust. Externally, they may resemble mundane lust, but internally, they are motivated exclusively by pure selfless prema. Internally, they are motivated exclusively by pure selfless prema. This is the important point that we need to understand, dear devotees, that whenever we are talking about relationship between Lord Krishna and gopis, although externally it may appear like lusty activities, but internally it is a very strong, intense, absorbed emotion within the gopis to satisfy Lord Krishna. Uh, and that is out of love, and that is why it appears like very intense, very calm roop like that. Now, in order to support this point, Srila Rupa Goswami again quotes from scriptures. Now this time he gives example of Uddhava. Uddhava was a very dear devotee of Lord Krishna. Uddhava had this speciality that he would look very similar to Lord Krishna. The appearance of Lord Krishna was same as the appearance of Uddhava. Now here in this verse, Bhakti Samrat Sindhu 286, the verse has been mentioned. And because it is a form of exalted prema, persons such as Uddhava, dear to the Lord, desired that aspect of it. So here this statement is being mentioned by Srila Rupa Goswami. He's saying, uh, now Uddhava had that desire. Uh, what desire he had? He had that desire that I should also have the same prem as the gopis of Vrindavan are having for Lord Krishna. Now, Uddhava is very dear to Krishna, and Krishna would not like anyone who had mundane lust in his heart. And Srila Prabhupada, in his book Nectar of Devotion, substantiate this example with another example. Srila Prabhupada gives example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was a very strict sannyasi. And as a strict sannyasi, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also praised the gopis' love for Krishna. So how can a sannyasi praise the love of gopis for Krishna if it is on a mundane lust platform? He cannot. So these two examples are given, one by Srila Rupa Goswami, one by our Prabhupada. Then another example Rupa Goswami gives from scripture where there is a tinge of mundane lust in a lady for Krishna. And then he gives an example of this lady called Kubja. She is also mentioned in Bhagavatam as Trivakra. Trivakra means she was disfigured lady. Kubja means henchbacked. She was disfigured lady. Lord Krishna actually, when he went to Mathura, he actually raised this chin of Kubja like this, and her back actually became very straightened, and she transformed into a very beautiful lady. But Kubja internally had material lust for Lord Krishna. So here it is being mentioned here. But the wise agree that the attraction to Krishna seen in Kubja is essentially due to almost calm. Almost calm means Kubja had some attraction, some genuine devotional attraction for the Lord, but it was mixed with mundane lust. So that is what Kubja had for emotion had for Krishna. So here Kubja's example has been given mainly to identify and to differentiate the attraction that gopis had for Lord Krishna, and in order to separate it out from the mundane kind of attraction, that example of Kubja has been given. So I think that yeah, that finishes our discussion on Ragatmika Bhakti today. Now let me tell you what we are discussing in this class is beyond our level. It is something like a student in LKG or upper KG is discussing something about PhD subject matter. However, the subject matter is theoretically simple to understand. So at least on a theoretical level, we try to understand the subject matter. But when we are talking about Ragatmika Bhakti, even Raganuga Bhakti is also at an exalted level, which we will understand in the next class. But uh, for our understanding, or in order to appreciate that how Srila Rupa Goswami has detailed out, has scripted out the science of bhakti in such great details, with such impeccable details in his books like Sri Bhakti Samrat Sindhu. That is something, if we can develop that kind of appreciation for Srila Rupa Goswami, if we can develop that kind of appreciation for the science of bhakti, I think this class is good enough for us. But I hope I have tried to make the subject matter as theoretically digestible to us as possible, and I hope you have picked up the message. In case not, maybe we can discuss now. It's time for some discussion. All glories to Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, Srila Rupa Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada. Questions and takeaways and comments. Now it's the time to discuss. Thank you very much for your very, very patient listening to this humble soul. Thanks a lot.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Yes.
Dandavat.
Dandavat Prabhu.
Take a little breath because my comment is also going to be little difficult to digest.
Okay.
So have little water.
Hmm.
This is I want to share with all, first with you, my Guruji, and then with all satsangis. Vrindavan gopis all loved our great Lord Sri Krishna. They all had a wish to marry Lord Krishna, but they never wanted to share Lord Krishna. Each gopi wanted to marry Lord Krishna separately. Most of us, we had a feeling, I don't know about others, I know about me. Krishna had 16,000 gopis, his wives.
Yeah.
Not
16,100.
one Krishna had one wife.
108. Yeah.
So one Krishna had one wife because no gopi wanted to share her Krishna to the other. So Krishna took so many different physical forms to marry each gopi separately. So
Yeah,
he never, single
Krishna could,
Krishna never
yeah,
had that kind of this.
yeah, Krishna could satisfy each of the married wife like he was personally present with them. Yeah.
So that is what I want to share.
Yeah.
And
Thank you,
about
Prabhuji.
this really, it looked very simple to listen, but it's really a little bit difficult to digest. But yes, this my second comment is about that liberation of demons. So that is two different things. It was not by wish of Krishna, liberation. The liberation was because the all four our this Veds, once they came to meet Narayan, the Vishnuji, and he was taking rest afternoon, he told his servants, his sevaks, Jay and Vijay, not to let anybody come in. When these Vedas, all the four, they came to see him, they put their desire, which was rejected by Jay and Vijay, and they were refused entry. They requested 2-3 times. Then they got angry. They said, okay, we give you Shrapa. When they want to give Shrapa, the Lord got up, Vishnuji. He came running to them. And then he said, now you have done a sin by stopping Bhagwan and Bhagat and this. Between me and, Vedas, nobody can come. So, and I cannot tell them to take away the shrap which they wanted to give. Now they will give, but I will request them to give a shrap which has a remedy. So then they took the request of our Narayan, and they said, okay, in 3 lives, they will take,
yeah,
they will
Prabhuji,
make such mistakes,
Prabhuji,
which will be worth
it is
death penalty.
just to make the discussion short. Devotees in the group generally know this story.
Okay,
The point is, Prabhu, here. The point here is that when we are talking about demons and who are killed by Lord Krishna, and they are attaining impersonal Brahman, it is actually not a glorification of demons. It is actually glorification of the Lord, because they were killed by the Lord. That is why they could manage that kind of a destination, and that was not the top destination. They actually got impersonal liberation, which by any spiritual standard is a very elevated platform. So when we are talking about those kind of objects or those kind of topics, we are actually glorifying the Lord. That even see, the point for us as devotees to understand is that if absorption in Krishna, in hatred and in enmity can result into a destination like impersonal liberation. What to speak of those who are actually genuinely trying to attain the lotus feet of the Lord out of love and affection? So that is the main lesson here we need to learn. Yeah. So just to cut short the discussion.
Ji, ji,
Uh,
ji,
yeah.
ji, Guruji.
So
No,
but
that
thank you
has
very
been
much.
made clear by
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
already.
Yeah. So that is
That
the main.
all
Correct.
those 6 ways of liberation,
Right. Right. So
the
that
envy
is
or yeah.
actually that is the glorification of the Lord. That the
Ji, ji,
Lord
ji.
by nature is so merciful and so
To all.
magnanimous that he doesn't even know what do you mean by lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, and he doesn't even know that.
Ji, ji.
So just somebody who is coming in contact with somebody like that, he has to get something positive, something reasonably good, something reasonably beneficial just by coming in contact. Yeah, that is
Ji,
the idea.
ji,
Yeah.
ji,
So
he
yeah,
gives liberation to all, good or
yeah,
bad,
correct.
sinner or not sinner,
Yeah, yeah,
and all that. That is
yeah,
his
yeah. So any other remarks or comments or
Ji, ji,
questions?
nahi, nahi. For today, this is enough.
Okay.
I think so.
I'll just like
Thank
to
you.
ask other devotees also
Ji, ji,
if there are
Guruji.
any other
Thank you,
remarks.
Guruji. Ji,
Okay.
Guruji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Yeshwar
Uh,
Prabhu.
I have a small, I can't say it's a suggestion or it's my thinking right now,
Uh-huh.
seeing the description given by Pratap Prabhu and your explanation
Mm-hmm.
throughout the class today,
Mm-hmm.
that to understand the loving relationship with Krishna, why
Hmm.
must we bring females into picture? Is
Why we
that the
must?
only females, the conjugal kind of thing? Why that example?
Yeah,
I think
because
a
yeah,
straight answer, you are an intelligent person with a brain, you can imagine, you can understand. I think short of that can also be done. The conjugal part can easily be kept away in
uh-huh.
understanding the whole thing. To me, it appears like that.
Well,
Otherwise, these philosophical wranglings will become dry again, will create dryness again.
that is what I made a disclaimer in the end of my talk. This is an exalted subject. And
Yes,
at the moment, our objective should be at least to understand it on a theoretical level.
yes,
Just
yes,
trusting the words of Srila Rup Goswami, who is already at an exalted level, who is
right,
already at a Raganuga stage or at a Ragatmika stage level, pure devotee at a Prema level. So
right.
when he is mentioning that in this book called Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, at least on a theoretical level, we develop this understanding between the relationship of gopis with Krishna, Lord Krishna. That is why, uh, and because this is the topmost destination of the result of the bhakti that we are doing, and in order to understand the science of bhakti, this has to be discussed, because otherwise we will not do the justice of the justice to the subject matter we are discussing. So that is why I made that disclaimer that at least on a theoretical level we understand it. The realization of this particular thing by Lord's mercy may come in this life or maybe in the another lives, we don't know. And that is the reason, in that spirit, I would say that we need to take this subject matter.
Okay,
प्रभु जी
great.
जो
Thank
गोपास थे गोप थे
हाँ
वृंदावन
जी,
के,
हाँ
वो
जी,
उस लेवल तक नहीं पहुंच सकते थे, गोपीज के लेवल तक?
हाँ, उनका भी वही है ना, उनका इट विल फॉल इनटू दी संबंध रूप रागात्मिका भक्ति. So they will not be in the conjugal relationship kind of discussion there, but they will be mostly sneha, or maybe in the form of friendliness. That kind of relationship will be for the gopas. See
So
the
that
major
is
yeah, the major difference between ragatmika bhakti is, and the other forms of bhakti is that here the person actually doesn't consider Lord Krishna as God, because the moment he starts or she starts to consider Lord Krishna as God, that mood of awe and reverence will come. But they have natural, intense, spontaneous love for the Lord, love for Krishna. So any gopa can actually play with Krishna, can wrestle with Krishna, can defeat Krishna in wrestling, and Krishna will be very joyful in accepting that defeat, and the Gopa will not also feel that I'm great. This is the kind of loving relationship they have with the Lord. So that is the point.
मगर वो टॉप मोस्ट उस तक भाव तक नहीं जा सकते हैं।
Topmost is Madhurya.
वो गोपीज का ही अधिकार है उस पर।
That is the Madhurya. Yes. Yeah.
एक प्रभु जी, एनिमीज ऑफ कृष्णा जो थे हैं और जो अष्टांग योगी हैं, दोनों का एक ही फेट है।
Ashtang Yogi, when we are talking about Ashtang Yogi, there are several categories to it. One category of Ashtang Yogi is genuinely who are actually sincerely want to attain impersonal liberation. And these are those people who are maybe not, they are ignorant about bhakti. Out of ignorance, they are following impersonal liberation. This is one category. But there is another category which is known as Mayavadis. And these Mayavadis are those people who are actually very envious of the Lord. And then they don't want to, they simply desire this impersonal liberation, or they only consider that the impersonal aspect of the Lord is the topmost. They reject the form of the Lord. And because they reject the form of the Lord, that is as good as being enemy of the Lord. So they may also attain this impersonal liberation. So Krishna gives them everything, but doesn't give them entrance into his own personal abode. Okay, you take impersonal liberation.
दोनों का फेट तो यही है ना कि मर्ज हो जाते हैं ब्रह्मन में।
Because both directly or indirectly are behaving like enemies of the Lord. But in this category, the sages in this category, those devotees are not coming, or those spiritualists are not coming, who are out of ignorance, they consider Brahman as the topmost aspect of transcendence. They don't understand pure Shuddha Bhakti. They actually have not come in contact with a devotee. They are not started a devotional life. Like for example, in the Bhagavad Gita class we just had on Wednesday, chapter 18, where we discussed about Varnashram. Then after Varnashram, there is Gyan Yogs. That okay, they achieve Gyan Yog level, and after they achieve Gyan Yog, then comes Bhakti. So there are certain people who don't really aspire for bhakti because they don't know about bhakti. They don't even know about bhakti, that bhakti is actually the topmost goal. They simply keep on aspiring for impersonal liberation. They will be dedicated, sincere Gyan yogis or Dhyan yogis, and such sincere Dhyan yogis, Gyan yogis may attain impersonal liberation. And in after attaining impersonal liberation, they may actually aspire for personal devotion for the Lord also. Like it is very evident in that verse in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. You remember that verse where we discussed about from karma to bhakti through Gyan?
Yes.
You remember that? From karma to bhakti, but on the way through Gyan Yoga. So these are those class of people who don't really have developed the understanding of Lord as personal. They understand that there is some supreme power, and that is impersonal Brahman. And they continue to progress, and they continue to do their karma yoga very nicely. They follow Varnashram very nicely. By following Varnashram very nicely, they progress to the level of purity. And by achieving that purity level, they start doing Gyan Yoga. And we understood Gyan Yoga means what? Gyan of what? Brahma Gyan. Impersonal Brahma. Uska Gyan is Gyan Yoga actually. And by doing that all very sincerely, they attain impersonal Brahman. So that is one category which is not enemy of Krishna, but they are genuine Brahmavadis. They are Brahmavadis actually.
तो फेट तो इन सब का एक ही है ना, चाहे वो कंस है या
हाँ,
ये
अगर ये जो कंस जो enemies भी हैं, if after attaining impersonal liberation they reject their enmity for the Lord, and they aspire for the personal liberation in a favorable way, they can also raise themselves to the highest level. They also can do that.
Okay. Even after merging in
Even
impersonal
after
Brahman,
even after merging in the impersonal Brahman,
they can progress.
they can progress. Yes, they can progress, but they have to leave the enmity. They have to leave that enmity feeling for the Lord. It has to be anukul. Anukulyena Krishna
Anukulyena
Anushilanam.
Krishna.
Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam Bhaktiruttama. Then they gave Bhaktiruttama. Then they get Uttam Bhakti. Not before that.
Right.
Before that, they get impersonal liberation because their mind was absorbed in the Lord. And because their mind was absorbed in the Lord, because Lord is merciful, so Lord actually granted them impersonal liberation.
Okay,
Okay.
Prabhuji, thank you.
Come to the kingdom, not to the palace. Yeah. Okay, so let me also welcome Lakshmi Vinayak ji. Prabhuji, welcome. Thank you for joining. And Sampat Kumar ji, we are still looking forward to your introduction in case you would like to share your feedback or introduction. If in case you have any questions, we look forward to your any remark that you would like to make. But I hope in general the class was understandable. It might be a little out of our own reach, but as a theoretical subject matter, I hope it is understandable. So we will continue with our discussion on Raga Nuga Bhakti, chapter number 16 in the next class. So the other classes like Bhava Bhakti and Prema Bhakti are also at a exalted level. So please bear with me when we are discussing these topics, but I can easily say that theoretically we can understand them. It is not that difficult that theoretically we can't understand them. So thank you very much and good night, goodbye, Hare Krishna. Thanks a lot.
Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Prabhu.
Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Thank you, Ji. Hare Krishna.